Hi, I'm Sitaraman G, and this episode of Make India Competitive Again was published on the 28th of April 2025. It's titled Bharat Shining. India's farms are its biggest trade weapon. Most discussions on the state of farming in India have an air of despondency. When low yields, indebtedness, and climate change are among the key words, it's foolish to expect anything else. Dismissing the gloom, though, doesn't take much effort. The number of Indians unable to have a healthy diet shrank 16% to 788 million in the 5 years to 2022, according to a joint report published last year by multiple United Nations agencies, including the Food and Agriculture Organization. That's twice the decline in the global figure. In the same period, the average daily cost of a healthy diet in lower middle-income countries, a group that includes India, rose by roughly a third to $3.36. The increase in India was just over half as much. A healthy diet is defined as a daily intake of 2,330 kilocalories from 6 different food groups. India's advances can be chalked up to its ubiquitous, if leaky public distribution system and also to its central bank's efforts to rein in inflation. But they also speak to something far more impressive: abundant food production. Sure, India could do a better job of turning its land, labor, capital, and other inputs such as fertilizers into produce. Its total factor productivity, a measure of efficiency, is just up under 60% since the turn of the century, compared with 70% in China, according to the US Department of Agriculture. China has done this after almost doubling its farm productivity in the previous 2 decades. But India outclasses countries with comparable per capita incomes. Agriculture's share in India's economic output, currently at over 14%, has fallen over the past decade after adjusting for inflation. But the country's big strides in the sector in recent years have given it the kind of edge in global trade it desperately seeks through manufacturing. In the decade to FY24, India's farm exports more than doubled to over $48 billion, or $15 billion more than its agricultural imports. The growth was 2.5 times the increase in goods the country sent around the world, and almost as much as the rise in services exports. Among major product categories, only smartphones grew faster. India's share of global farm exports is a mere 2.2%, but that's higher than the country's contribution to total merchandise commerce. The South Asian powerhouse has largely been able to hold its own as a trader of agricultural produce, even as smaller economies such as Thailand and Indonesia have lately made themselves conspicuous. Consider India's largest farm export. In 2013, its outbound rice shipments were only 1/6 that of the US, according to the FAO. By 2023, India had narrowed that gap to just 1/3. Sugar exports from the country outgrew the global total in the same period. India pulled this off despite its periodic bans on certain food exports in order to shore up domestic supply and keep prices from spiraling out of control. Whenever India's restrictions kick in, ripples quickly spread across the globe, as the bans on rice and onion exports in the past few years made clear. A quick look at the world's largest bilateral trading relationships in agricultural commodities shows the extent of India's untapped potential. In 2023, Brazil shipped farm goods worth nearly $54 billion to China. India's exports to the US, its largest trading partner, were just a tenth of that. Of course, the recipient's appetite makes a huge difference. China slaughters roughly 700 million pigs a year, or 1 for every 2 residents. And feeding all those hogs means sourcing soybeans in eye-watering quantities, including from Brazil. The US, with a quarter of China's population, is nowhere near as ravenous, and not just in soybeans. But India could possibly count on the US being kind to it, relatively speaking. New York Post recently reported that the US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent told reporters that trade talks with India were very close to reaching a successful conclusion. He said, and I quote, "India has fewer non-tariff trade barriers, obviously, no currency manipulation, very, very little government subsidies, so reaching a deal with Indians is much easier." India will have to brace itself for a US move to raise the weighted average tariff on its farm goods from the current 5.3%, considering India levies almost 38% on US produce. But that's a small price to pay now in order to have the chance to flex its muscle in a future where the US and China continue to loathe each other. Doing so requires India to get a move on in the technologies it deploys in its farms. In the past 2 decades, India has filed one international patent application in agri-tech for every 3 by China, according to the World Intellectual Property Organization. In highly disruptive corners of agri-tech, such as the use of robotics and artificial intelligence in precision farming, China has a near unbridgeable lead, with 5 times the filings as India between 2017 and 2021. The lack of innovation is painfully obvious among venture capital-backed companies. Most Indian agri-tech startups are nothing more than glorified traders or intermediaries selling farm inputs or helping farmers get loans. Full stack in agri-tech is code for opportunism. India's Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal's recent outburst at startups for obsessing over food and grocery delivery was the result of frustration that they didn't give India much leverage in trade talks. Thankfully, in agriculture, the country has leverage in spades, even without a helping hand from its tech entrepreneurs. This episode of Make in India Competitive Again was authored and read by me, Sitaraman G. It was produced by Rajiv CN. You can read the newsletter on our website or our mobile app. Tune in next week for a new episode.